2012, the year that everyone thought the world was going to end, and also the year the first Amazing Spider-Man movie came out. Now, while the world didn't end, for some people, this movie might as well have been the end of the world for them due to the amount of hate it got when it released. Look, I will always defend the Amazing Spider-Man no matter what. The first movie wasn't all that bad. The second one, yeah, that was pretty bad. You know something else that's pretty bad? The Amazing Spider-Man video game. Released on June 29, 2012 and developed by Beanox, the people responsible for Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and the runner-up for Game of the Year 2007, the B-movie video game. The Amazing Spider-Man video game was met with mixed to negative reviews, much like its movie counterpart. Was it really that bad though? Well, this is the one Spider-Man game I've never actually played, so without further ado, let's take a look at the Amazing Spider-Man video game that's Forza Motorsport 2. Alright, the first thing I want to say about this game is this menu. While I like how simple it is, I just have one complaint. What the hell is up with these scan lines? It feels like I'm playing on a damn CRT TV. Actually, starting the game, you're given 3 options for difficulty: human, hero, and superhero. Now, I'm gonna do human difficulty just for the sake of getting this video done, but trust me, I could do superhero difficulty if I really wanted to. Now, before I actually talk about the gameplay and whatnot, I wanted to talk about the story. The story kinda sucks though, so I'll try to make it as quick as I can. The story begins with not Emma Stone sneaking Peter into Oscorp, somehow without getting caught. I mean, there's literally people right there looking right at them. After getting into Oscorp, Gwen and Peter end up running into the new Oscorp CEO, Alistair Smythe, who I think might be the villain. Anyway, Smythe gives Peter and Gwen a tour and shows them all the cross-species Oscorp has been working on, continuing Dr. Connor's work from when he tried to turn everybody into lizards. Smythe's whole deal is he's into nanobots and robots and stuff like that, and he wants to get rid of all these cross-species. Now, by this point, you're probably thinking, wait, this isn't how the movie went? Well, that's because, unlike most movie tie-in games where they try their best to follow the actual plot of the movie they're adapting pretty closely, Beanox decided that they just weren't gonna do that and ended up making this game more of a sequel to the movie. So due to this taking place after the events of the first movie, the Lizard is in prison and Gwen Stacy's father is still fucking dead. Smythe tells Peter and Gwen that all the cross species in Oscorp are highly dangerous and will kill you if you get bitten due to there being no working antidote. The tour then ends when Smythe tells Gwen to help with the scorpion cross species until everything goes wrong with all the cross species reacting to Peter due to him technically being your cross species himself. Scorpion ends up breaking out of containment along with all the other cross species and all hell breaks loose. Gwen ends up getting bitten by one of them and Peter goes into Spider-Man mode.
What the fuck wrong with you? I'm on that good cushion, that good cushion. What the fuck wrong with you? Yeah,
This is where we're introduced to the fact that this gameplay is bad. Anyways, more on that later. Peter gets Gwen to quarantine and goes off to find Dr. Connors to make an antidote. After leaving Oscorp, we find a giant robot which belongs to Smythe. These robots will pop up a lot throughout the game, but essentially they're designed to kill any cross species that they come across, including Spider-Man. Anyways, we defeat the giant robot and go to free Connors from the asylum he's in. After freeing Connors, we take him back to Peter's apartment. Peter then contacts Gwen to get her to gather Connor's research, but she tells him that she can't due to Smythe making her and everyone else in quarantine feel like prisoners. After getting Connor set up in the apartment, Spider-Man then heads off to go to the Oscorp archives to gather the research himself, only to get stopped by Rhino on the way there. After beating the shit out of Rhino, Spider-Man makes it to the Oscorp archives where he meets Whitney Chang, a news reporter who's looking for whatever she can to prove the new Oscorp isn't quite what they say they are. So with Whitney's help, we make it through the archives, grab Connor's research, and make our way back out. We then head back back to the apartment to give Connors his research so he can work on the antidote. Peter then tries to contact Gwen, only to end up talking to Smythe, who tells Peter that he's working on an antidote of his own made with nanobots. He tells Peter and Connors that they can keep working on their antidote, but they can only use it if they finish it before he finishes his nanobot antidote. I still wonder who the villain could possibly be. This then begins chapter 4, in which Peter has to go to the sewers to gather DNA from one of the cross species. After taking down the vermin cross species, we get the DNA and head back to the apartment. Yeah, from this point onwards, the story kinda gets repetitive, so I'm gonna speed this up a bit. Chapter 5, Connors finishes the antidote. Yeah, that's really all that happened in chapter 5. Chapter 6, we take the antidote to Oscorp only for Smythe to use it on himself. Turns out the antidote wasn't quite ready yet. Now get ready for 6 more chapters of doing the same fucking things we did for chapters 1 through 6, all over again. On the way out of Oscorp, we fight Scorpion. This is pretty much the same as the Vermin boss fight. This is immediately followed by a fight with another giant robot. This time, it's a worm, but it plays exactly the same as the robot boss fight from chapter 1. It was a pretty cool boss fight though. Anyways, we defeat the giant robot, head back to the apartment, and oh no, Dr. Connors is gone! Just kidding, he's still there. Spider-Man fucking dies. Connor then realizes Spider-Man was the answer all along for the antidote since Peter never got infected. Connors then uses Peter's blood to develop a new antidote, which means only one thing. Back to Oscorp we go! Once arriving back at Oscorp, we fight our way through to help a group of scientists. Spider-Man ends up getting overwhelmed by a bunch of Smythe's robots, only for a Spider Slayer to come to Spider-Man's aid, which just so happened to have been sent by Gwen, meaning that Gwen is still alive. So Spider-Man gives the antidote to the scientists and goes off to find Gwen. And she's dead.
I'm lost without you, Gwen.
Peter.
Never mind, false alarm. After curing Gwen of the virus, we then go fight Scorpion a second time. This fight is no different from the first fight with him. Chapter 8, Black Cat, who we actually helped escape all the way back in chapter 2, robs a bank, so now it's our job to stop her. After chasing her all the way through the subway, we finally catch her and put an end to the robbery. This adds nothing to the plot at all. Chapter 9, we take down yet another one of Smythe's robots. Chapter 10, Smythe's taking Connors hostage, so now we have to get Connors out of there.
Think of Oppenheimer.
Once again, we fight through more of Smythe's robots. Eventually, we make it to Connors to free him, only for things to end in disaster when Spider-Man gets caught by Smythe. Spider-Man then tells Connors to run to his lab in the sewers so he can continue work on the antidote. Spider-Man then gets knocked the fuck out, gets injected with Smythe's nanobot antidote, and is left powerless as a result. Ironically, this is where the game starts to get a bit better. Who would have thought the part where you're not able to use any of Spider-Man's powers would actually be the better part of a Spider-Man game? Anyways, due to Spider-Man being powerless, Smythe ends up beating the shit out of him in a giant mech suit like it's Titanfall 2. The rest of this level just sees you running away without any powers to defend yourself trying to escape. After finally making it back outside, we see what's happened in New York City and just how bad things have gotten, with the total number of infected also reaching 1.5 million. Something tells me that's not good. At this point, we run to Connor's lab in the sewers, where Connors realizes that he's the only one that can actually do anything in this situation. So he transforms himself back into the lizard and takes off to stop Smythe with the small window he has while he's in full control of the lizard. Not too long after the lizard takes off, Spider-Man wakes up and heads over to help Connors take on Smythe. Wait, Smythe is the villain? After making it to the lizard to help him out, Spider-Man heads inside of Smythe's robots to kill the generators, in turn giving him his powers back after the electricity killed the nanobots inside his bloodstream. After that, we help the lizard defeat Smythe and finish him off for good, only for the lizard to take full control over Connors and run away back into the sewers. So then we go back into the sewers, defeat the lizard, and New York is saved. Thank God. The game then ends with Alistair Smythe straight up killing himself. What a story. So that was the story of the Amazing Spider-Man video game. Overall, the story felt super repetitive, and with this being an epilogue to the movie, it means this game has meant absolutely nothing since 2014 because of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 retconning the hell out of this game. Now you could argue this game was never canon to begin with, and you're probably right, but it doesn't excuse the fact that this story was weird as hell. Now is it the absolute worst story I've ever played in a video game? Well, I've definitely played worse. Despite the story being kinda mid, at least least we get the ability to change the time of day after we beat the story. You can choose from day, night, dusk, hell. So while the story is passable, the gameplay, on the other hand, is not. The gameplay for The Amazing Spider-Man is god-awful. I want to first talk about the web swinging because it's probably the worst part about this whole game. Web swinging in this game is enough to make anyone motion sick. Even if you don't experience motion sickness, this will still have you feeling nauseous as hell. The camera, for whatever reason, is placed really close to Spider-Man when swinging, so one, seeing where the hell you're going is always pretty difficult because Spider-Man's always in the way, and two, having the camera always attached to the back of Spider-Man does not make for a fun experience when you're constantly swinging everywhere. The best way I can describe the web swinging in this game is that it feels really stiff, and honestly it just makes me want to go play Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 2 instead. Combine the bad web swinging with the awful camera and it makes for a miserable experience. The camera being bad while swinging is one thing though, but when fighting anything, the camera just becomes 10 times worse. Speaking of the combat in this game is also pretty bad. It's obvious they tried to replicate the Batman Arkham style combat, but it just does not work in this game. Countering moves when there's more than 4 enemies on screen is always a pain in the ass. You do have a web strike, which never works since you'll always end up hitting the wrong person with it. Now, it's not all bad. I do like the signature moves. Actually, that's really the only thing I enjoy about the combat. Well, what about stealth? Stealth in this game, much like everything else I just talked about, is also pretty bad. It's very hard to pick enemies off without getting caught in certain sections because certain enemies just won't move from the spot they're in at all. Now, you can get upgrades to make stealth a little bit easier by being able to web 1 or 2 people up at a time to the ceiling, but even with these upgrades, stealth is still pretty bad. One other thing I just did not like about the gameplay was the web rush mode. Essentially, web rush lets you pick spots to web zip to, and it provides an easy way of getting to enemies quicker. In my experience though, web rush usually got me killed most of the time, as it would always end up putting me in a situation I couldn't get out of due to putting me in a different spot compared to where I actually wanted to go. The web rush mode also shows Spider-Man's giant eyes on screen when you activate it, and it can make seeing where you want to go super difficult at times. Other than that though, that's really it for general gameplay mechanics. As for the game itself, that's not all because there's tons of extra stuff to do around the map, like rescuing infected civilians, fighting crimes, and a whole lot more. This is where I feel the game shines the most, is with all the extra stuff you can do. You can unlock a multitude of suits and a bunch of other little extras from completing the side content in this game, which is pretty cool. With all that being said, the gameplay of the Amazing Spider-Man video game is pretty bad. Bad combat, bad web swinging, the two things you don't want in a Spider-Man game. While those two things are bad though, as I said, all the extra stuff is pretty cool. Now, something I loved about this game is the suit damage. This easily puts Spider-Man 2's suit damage to shame. Another cool thing this game had, which I didn't mention when I was talking about the story, is the social media posts from people in the city. As the game progresses, you see people posting about what's happening in the city. This was honestly pretty cool as you actually got to see people's reactions to events that were unfolding in the story. I just thought it made the whole world in this game feel a lot more lively. So the gameplay does have some good bits to it, but in my time of playing the game, the flaws outshine the actual good parts of the gameplay. So that was The Amazing Spider-Man on Xbox 360. Going into making this video, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this game. I've always heard mixed things about it, and after finally trying it for myself, as I said in this video, I just didn't really like it that much. I really wanted to like it, but as I said, this game's flaws just outweighed the good things going for it. So to answer the question of, is The Amazing Spider-Man video game worse than you remember? Yes. Yes, it is. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go play a good Spider-Man game. Now this is what a real Spider-Man game looks like.